Grace, mercy, and peace to you from our extravagant Creator. I am Michael Oakley. This is meant to be a promotion for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, Southern Ohio Synod, Vibrant Church Conference on Saturday, August 14th, 2021, 10 a.m. This vibrant conversation is called Plant a Community Garden, Hands-on Creation Cultivation as Evangelism. Please read the conference description because I worked pretty hard to get all those puns and metaphors in there. Please also read my short biography so that you know a little about me. I am a retired ELCA minister of Word and Sacrament, rostered in ELCA Northeast Ohio Synod. My pronouns are he, him, his. I live in Southwest Ohio on the land of the Mia Mia people, between the Little and Great Miami Rivers. The Mia Mia were part of the Shawnee Nation, the descendants of the Mound Builders. I grew up in a northwest Cincinnati suburb, about 15 miles from where I live now on the east side of Cincinnati. While it didn't show up in my Ancestry DNA report, gardening is in my DNA. All branches of my family have been cultivating the soil in Southwest Ohio since at least the 1880s, and some since the early 1800s. As evidence, I have two of these. And if you participate in the Zoom conversation on August 14th, I will tell you who these belong to and why they are among my most prized possessions. But now, for the sake of keeping you awake, just trust me that my gardening experience is wide and very deep, pun intended. My experience with Community Garden began in the 1980s when I became pastor of Cross Lutheran, Ixonia, Wisconsin. As you may know, up until around World War II, a rural pastor's compensation consisted mostly of a parsonage, a garden, maybe a barn, a chicken coop for sure, maybe a horse, maybe a cow, and support supplies to run all of those. Also, the pastor and family would receive in-kind contributions from members and maybe some cash. My 1930s predecessor, Pastor Waldemar Schlachtenhaufen, and his family cultivated the very large garden on the church grounds. The story went that Pastor Schlachtenhaufen thought he ordered a single box of asparagus roots to plant in the garden. Instead, he received cases of asparagus roots. There was more than enough to plant along the whole length of the garden. By the 1980s, 50 years later, when I and my family were there, the asparagus bed was 6 feet wide and 30 yards long. The garden had been reduced to half that length. In June, every year, there was such an abundance of asparagus that all the members of the congregation and neighbors helped themselves to what they could use. It was a fun place of plenty of healthy food and friendship. People gathered to work, share, eat, and care. Pastor Schlachtenhaufen, his ordering error resulted in a kind of 5 loaves and 2 fishes experience. I'm sure that there have been well over 5,000 helpings of asparagus from one wild gardening event. So with those experiences in mind, let me move to my last congregation, Redeemer ELCA, Brook Park, Ohio. The small city of Brook Park is an inner ring suburb of Cleveland. Before World War II, it was dairy farms and raspberries that fed Cleveland. After World War II, development started because of Hopkins International Airport and I-71. Housing development really took off in the 1950s when Korean War veterans and their families, many of whom left Lutheran coal mining towns in Pennsylvania, and moved to the area to work in the Ford and Chevrolet plants. The American Lutheran Church started a mission congregation, Redeemer, in 1958 that reached its peak membership of 1,200 or so in 1962, just 4 years after starting, because of all the baby boom children. But as those boomers matured, like me, they moved away. When I arrived at Redeemer in 2004, I was greeted with energetic, and enthusiastic 70-plus-year-olds, some of their children and grandkids. They were ready to try anything to keep Redeemer. I will usually refer to it as RLCBP. They were ready to try anything to keep RLCBP telling the good news of God's love. And we did. By 2009, our school system had belatedly closed one of its 2 high schools, a tangible sign of the decline in the population of the area. I had become accustomed to helping those formerly energetic 70-year-olds, now 80 plus, decide on the best supportive living arrangement or doing funerals. The recession hit, and ELCA wonderfully decided to finally sort of affirm that LGBTQIA plus people could live their full selves inside the church. Some of our members left for more fundamentalist groups. Things looked pretty grim for RLCBP. After much prayer and conversation, RLCBP decided to take a hospice attitude. Yes, hospice. We decided to try whatever wild, loving thing came along and go out with an explosion of God's love. We figured we would eventually merge with one of the other 2 formerly large ELCA congregations in our dwindling population school district. Some of the other issues and/or opportunities we were dealing with included an amazing 1959 to 1968 giant building. The Soviet-style 4-story worship centrum could hold 400, and we had dwindled to 75. The building had a big brown roof that faced the road, and we were often identified as the church with the big brown roof. The mostly flat roof leaked no matter what repairs we did. We had 4 acres of yard to mow, at some considerable expense. Cuyahoga County needed to separate its storm and sanitary sewers and wanted everyone to keep their stormwater on their own property. They began charging a fee for every square foot of impervious surface. That meant roof and parking lot. We housed a large childcare. We had old, half-missing landscaping, but had engaged a landscaper to draw a plan and implemented some of it. We had a small food pantry and supported the community pantry. The community pantry was going through a transition and eventually moved to a neighboring congregation. We had buzzards sitting on our big brown roof from March 15th through June. We talked about climate change and care of creation. I had worked for OSU Extension for a year and a half or so prior to coming to RLCBP. We had lots of retired gardeners in the congregation. We had paper recycling bins, and we were doing composting. Also in 2009, I learned that the Cuyahoga County Office of OSU Extension was offering small grants and technical advice for starting a community garden. This was an expansion of their Cleveland program into the suburbs. I talked to the church council about this, and we set up a task force to explore. After being fascinated by the possibility, we proposed it to council and dove headfirst into community gardening. With so much mowing lawn to do, what was there to consider? Lots of things that we finally discovered. First of all, we didn't have enough strong, healthy people to do the garden on our own. We needed to do something different. So we decided to offer plots to neighbors. And we all lived happily ever after? No, it wasn't that easy, but it was pretty wonderful. I have few natural gifts, but one is building networks of people and resources, connecting them and engaging people. The garden turned out to be an abundant crop of new connections and resources. A scout troop took one of the plots to raise and then give food to the community pantry. A mother of one of the scouts, a devout Catholic, was on the Brook Park City Council. She told me that the Greater Cleveland Food Bank was offering a new program called Mobile Food Pantry. Greater Cleveland Food Bank would bring a truckload of food, mostly fresh fruit and vegetables, to a location, and then volunteers would distribute it. I talked to my clergy colleagues, and we decided that RLCBP had the best parking lot for hosting this adventure. But again, we could not do it alone. One Saturday morning a month, congregations and all kinds of community groups came to help with the distribution. Firefighters, scouts, some of our child care families, neighbors, and more. OSU Extension began offering canning workshops to locations where there were community gardens. We, of course, had a big kitchen, and we couldn't believe the turnout when we hosted a canning workshop. We hosted a harvest celebration. We hosted a stormwater management workshop for the neighborhood. We annually celebrated the buzzard's return on March 15th with pancakes made by the city council members and a speaker from Cleveland Metro Parks. We added pollinator gardens to our landscaping. With Lutherans Restoring Creation and Interfaith Power and Light, we explored doing something with our leaking flat roofs. Green roofs, solar panels, wind turbines. Well, we were a little too far ahead of ourselves and the technology and the price 10 years ago, but maybe now. As we came to know our neighbors better, we saw a need to look at our own blind spots. We did some anti-racism training, as we would call it now, and began the Reconciling in Christ certification process with Reconciling Works. RLCBP was no longer known as the church with the big brown roof. We were known as a gathering that served its community and engaged its neighbors, welcoming everyone in. RLCBP didn't exactly grow, but it steadily received enough members to replace our Korean War veterans and their spouses who were moving on. As best I can tell from afar, RLCBP is still living a hospice lifestyle, unconcerned about how to keep the institution going, giving all the love it has received from our loving God. RLCBP's future as an institution is not certain, but as it shares God's abundant love, RLCBP makes every moment valuable beyond measure. If you want to do any of these kinds of things now, please see the attached list of resource links for things like OSU Extension, Interfaith Power and Light, Lutherans Restoring Creation, European Descent Lutheran Association for Racial Justice. You must see the movie Kiss the Ground for a hopeful perspective on climate change. On August 14th, we will be having conversations about your personal and your congregation's past, present, and future in the garden. Please take some time to prepare using the attached page of preparation tasks and questions. We will be in conversation. You will be doing most of the teaching. I will tell you whatever you want to know about my wooden shoes and anything else you ask, and I might know. We can even talk about the how of community gardening. There are some great resource links listed for that. Community gardening is about the Creator's community first, and then gardening. Praise and thanksgiving, God, we would offer. For all things living you have made good. Harvest of sown fields, fruits of the orchard, hay from the mown fields, blossom and wood. See you on the 14th. Peace be with you.